In Jerusalem's ancient streets, only a shadow of 1948 Christian population remains. We are expected to believe they vanished as if by UFO. Christian communities, present for 2 millennia, now face a surge of intimidation and harassment. Extremist Israeli settler groups, organ harvesters and Epstein-affiliated crime networks, emboldened by radical ideologies like that of Meir Kahan, openly target Christian clergy and pilgrims, vandalizing holy sites, firing on school children, and seizing properties in the Old City. These actions, once fringe, are moving into the mainstream as political figures linked to radical settler movements gain power, lending legitimacy to violence. Christians report feeling abandoned by law enforcement, left vulnerable in their historic neighborhoods. The goal to make life untenable for Christians, forcing them out, where the mass murder of 1948 missed these vulnerable families. American organized crime under veil of synagogues pushes for home theft and demolition, altering Bethlehem, Nazareth, and Jerusalem's demographic fabric. The persecution of 2,000 years continues under cover of inflated anti-Semitism alarmism. This campaign combines street harassment with legal maneuvers to seize land, applying relentless pressure on one of the world's oldest Christian populations. Jerusalem, once a beacon of coexistence, now teeters on the edge of religious conflict and intolerance. The survival of its Christian community hangs in the balance. Extremist movements draw on secret interpretations of Talmud, Book of Joshua, untranslated policy statements hidden in non-Hebrew media. Documentaries like The Other Israel and Jewish Ritual Murder censored from social media. This controversial literature justifies hostility, injustice, and removal of communities in the way of white supremacist expansion of Jews into native lands, fueling a toxic discourse. Lynchings, rapes, arson, kidnappings, and organ theft. Social media amplifies the impunity IDF and settler groups feel to gun down civilians, abduct children, poison wells, and gang up on old women and young girls, with videos of abuse against Christians and Palestinian civilians celebrated and shared in TikTok groups that show gleeful enjoyment of scenes of maimed and mutilated doctors and reporters normalizing violence. Mirroring the thousands of years of Jewish ritual murder that is presented as untrue blood libels, that we can see a disparity between what is said and what is normalized when there is no threat of consequences. The movement to rebuild a third temple on the Temple Mount openly gives zealots on the street a platform to say openly their Messiah will not come until the last 20% of Christian blood is spilled. 1% of Israel in total Temple Mount is a site sacred to Jews and Muslims, despite there being evidence that the original site was reduced to flat ground by the Romans. According to Josephus, rebuilding the temple is a rallying cry for religious Zionists and some evangelical Christians, techies who want to institute a surveillance infrastructure of mechanized murder and AI-driven injustice, creating the environment for the rise of the Antichrist. From the Book of Revelation's tech dystopia, RFID chips and concentration camps show a potential for a nightmare of biblical scale. This push for World War III on Iran, bringing in Russia and China, excites those with billionaire bunker access. Those whose children are in a protected class who will not be drafted deepens instability. There's a real threat of open human sacrifice, death squads, false flags, mass graves, systemic sex abuse and torture to create a third temple. For Jerusalem's Christians, these tensions add another layer of insecurity, violence and torture for those unwilling to leave their homes, for new arrivals from New York, Florida, and Beverly Hills, coming to move into homes seized at gunpoint and enact some repressed rage on sleeping families who wake to fire bombs in cribs, as the West Bank risks being engulfed by wider religious conflict. Online and offline, hate is spreading as censorship targets anyone speaking out. Facebook and X both hire Shin Bet Stasi to censor news about this. Torturers are moving to the USA to work in tech as moderators, marking rape allegations as incitement, banning accounts. Google is also staffed by predators with direct links to the molestation and torture of 40% of Palestinians, assaulted by IDF and Israeli secret police as children, allowing rapists to prevent their victims from speaking out in real time. Some Israeli political and religious leaders cite commands to kill women and babies of Amalek, while out of the other side of their demonic neck claim Palestinians don't exist, despite being named for their Philistine ancestors. Likud cannibals invoke ancient biblical commands or evil days of human sacrifice. Burned effigies offered to Baal under the Star of Remphan, framing modern conflicts as holy wars. As Jews once stabbed babies under the altars of Moloch, burnt offerings given to the demon of Bohemian Grove, This rhetoric, echoed by rabbis within the military, dehumanizes adversaries, calls non-Jews goyim, meaning cattle, to be cut up and sold in organ harvest, sex abuse and slavery, and blurs the line between military action and extremist violence. From Manhattan boardrooms to quiet Jewish enclaves of wealth in New Jersey, blood money races through accounts to fund lynchings. The Jewish Defense League's global reach to murder Americans, carry out bombings on U.S. soil, their foothold in Canada, shows how these ideologies extend beyond Israel, targeting critics and exporting conflict. Lee Camp has reported the sarin attacks used by West to fill Syria with Al-Qaeda and ISIS were fabricated. Meanwhile, the CIA dirty war in Syria has mass murdered millions in Iraq and other sites of treachery, has left Christians across the region vulnerable, not by accident but intentionally, wiping out whole regions for Greater Israel. Turkish pipelines and oil mafia smuggling as state collapse and extremism threaten their survival. Human sacrifice veiled behind red heifer prophecy has created armies of traitors lying in wait to murder Christian babies for the Talmudic ideology. For Jerusalem's Christians, Syria's chaos is a warning. Unchecked radicalism can destroy ancient communities. Price tag attacks, weddings where young rabbis in training stab pictures of dead babies while carrying American-supplied M16s, the rise of extremist ideologies in Jewish private schools and summer camps, teaching a murderous side of the Old Testament hidden from non-Jews. The funding of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria shows there is nothing too evil for the synagogue of Satan conspiracy. Let the hind murdered in her car seat, baby Ali burned alive in his crib mirror these dangers, putting Mideast Christian populations at risk as more countries are targeted for eternal dirty war, economic predation, and Western-backed insurgencies. The stakes are nothing less than the future of all non-Jews, with the exposure of the Talmud in history leading to civil wars, plagues, starvation, and intentional cruelty of the ruling elite as its power is slipping. Foreign funding, Zionist nepotism, ideological glass ceilings, censorship on social media, and dirty money enabling subversion of the Constitution and Bill of Rights in the United States. Crushing media monopolies push one idea, one way of thinking: fear of speaking in ways the Talmudist gangsters will seize on to steal your money, hound your job, or attack you in the streets. This enables radical settler groups to intensify pressure on Christians in Jerusalem. The Israeli military uses apps to harass and intimidate Americans openly, as shown in the Lobby USA Act. EEL openly calls for recruitment to spy outside Israel, with Jewish students unknowingly betraying their country. Millions flow through tax-exempt charities, mafias under guise of rabbis in West Hollywood, running money laundering rings out of buildings on La Brea, Wilshire and Beverly. Empty storefronts in Tarzana housing vast spy networks and synagogues as fronts for training violent settlers in the art of gang stalking, to organizations that displace Christian and Palestinian families, not in subtle ways, not in sparse night raids or settlers crashing bulldozers into the Armenian quarter, but with families dragged out into fields and bayoneted or blown apart with grenades, often under the guise of philanthropy. Child sold to yacht parties in Mid-East fund the massive dirty money that funds political campaigns, bankster wars, and Zionist financial larceny. This financial pipeline links private donors. New Jersey synagogues, famous for organ harvest rings, are now selling stolen land in private racist sales for a ruling class that claims it's being persecuted by being reported on to the erosion of Christian presence in the Holy Land. Walls around communities, staffed by snipers and bloodletters who stalk children with the tools of the state for druggings and pornography with trafficked Palestinian women. The targeted harassment of Christians shows the true face of the USA and UK governments, using Israel as a test to see what forms of class violence and domestic militarism are possible as the rulers and billionaires fall out of favor with masses. These acts of state violence, double standards of racist propagandists presenting victimizers as noble heroes among a sea of subhuman brown bodies who must be smashed for God's plan, shatters the narrative of shared Judeo-Christian values and undermines any hope for peace, while such heavy and crushing injustice is funded unconsensually by taxpayers fed up with Israel's nuclear alarmism with Iran, constant lobbying to put us further into debt. As settlements expand, IDF war criminals flee prosecution in America, Argentina, Cyprus, Thailand, spreading their lust for injustice and sexual torture to vulnerable people in economically depressed regions. Tech predators reach grows with CIA contracts, NSA outsourcing illegal domestic surveillance, buying elections, and extremists gain power. International supporters must confront the consequences of their aid. Charity networks in Beverly Hills and Manhattan have as little right to exist as Al-Qaeda dirty money networks. The war on terror missed the dancing Israelis entirely. Without accountability, vampires and ghouls dancing lust for child torture, snuff, and necropedophilia videos will embolden the mentality of Epstein's co-conspirators, cruising Wall Street for more contacts to benefit the Mossad spy agency. Jerusalem's Christian heritage, central to its identity for 2 millennia, may vanish into mass graves, thermobaric bombardment vaporizing the cattle marked for destruction by Talmudist diatribes, children burned over 90% of their bodies with white phosphorus chemical burns. The world faces a choice B called an anti-Semite and engage this growing cyst before it turns into a cancer that dooms the world, use Mossad and IDF tactics against their assets abroad, act to preserve lives of those the oligarch media monopolies and Ashkenazi executive monoculture will tell you don't exist, or if they are killed on camera, didn't deserve to live. If we don't combat these interests here, we witness the loss of thousands of families who escaped the ethnic cleansing that remains the curse of 1948.